on YouTube. Okay, here we are. August 21st, Node.js tooling group meeting. Hi everybody. Uh, so does anybody have any sort of like announcement type thing that they just wanted to make people aware of? Okay. So if not, I think we can start looking at the agenda. So I remember last meeting, we started talking about the configuration file location business, and there was a lot of chat. We spent probably half the meeting just kind of hammering on that one, and I'm thinking that maybe we should just do a deep dive on that one day. Just because there's a lot of different ideas, there's a lot of different ways to approach the problem, and yeah, maybe we should. I guess I don't want to risk taking up all of this meeting again to just dive back into it. What do we think? Any objections there? All right. So yeah, let's just schedule a deep dive for that. And I think before that, and so we'll probably want to come up with some sort of agenda for it, and maybe list out the various like ideas and proposals in some sort of way that makes sense, and try to just have a little bit of structure for it. But on the topic of deep dives, so I did schedule a deep dive. So the next meeting, not this one, but the next one, obviously not this one because here we are. But the next one is going to be a deep dive on recursive file system operations. So if you have no interest in that whatsoever, you can just skip the next meeting. If you know someone who cares about it, maybe bother them to show up or something, because that's what we will be talking about next meeting, which is, I think, September 4th. And so what I think maybe then makes sense is the next meeting after the 4th is to have a normal meeting. And then the meeting after that, which would be, I don't know, math. So something like just late September would be this deep dive for the config file stuff. If anybody wants to try to do something sooner, we could try to work out scheduling for that, but it's just kind of easy to just take the meeting time we already have. So yeah, does that sound cool? Super. Okay, so that like knocks off 3 things on the agenda, unless anybody else has anything they want to talk about on like deep dive stuff or the recursive file system deep dive meeting. I think what we should probably do again is before next meeting, somebody should work on an agenda for that one, so it's not just a free for all. So and I don't know if anybody wants to volunteer to propose an agenda. If not, I can probably do it. Just kind of come up with something. But. All right. Okay. So moving on then. So the next one we have is the FFI stuff. Last meeting, it was, let's see, Brian said Gus is working on some stuff. I don't know if Gus Kaplan. I don't know if if you know of any updates there, Brian.
Yeah, pretty much nothing changed since last week. I've been working on other things. Gus has been working on other things. So yeah, that's no progress there this week.
Okay. Does anybody know about the chmod r stuff?
I feel like, I mean, we did a spike, Darcy and I did a spike on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, I think, fell off a little bit. Maybe we could make that one of the agenda items on the deep dive on the file stuff. I'm actually way more excited about copy recursive, honestly. So if there are like major concerns in security around permission changes, maybe we just choose not to do that. Like we actively say, this is a function we're not going to implement or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that might be a way to approach it.
Okay. Then the next one is the ESM module reloading, module graph sort of thing. And so I think this was yesterday. Was this yesterday? Brian was like, "Why can't I do this?" And I'm like, "Brian, have you even been paying attention?"
Yeah, we've been talking about it for like 6 months.
Sorry.
And so no, it was funny, but it brought up some stuff. So I linked the thread in the minutes, but in that thread I posted a link, which I should probably post here too, to a blog post on Dev by Gil, who showed how you can use use test double, which is a mocking library to do this. What it comes down to is you have to use a loader. So okay, so loaders are experimental, as far as I understand. You can only use one loader, which is a drawback. And I believe that there's room for improvement there. At least it sounded like from that thread, like people still wanted to make some changes to it and improve it, or gather feedback. But in order to do this, to make it happen, you have to use this like a special loader, and essentially what their implementation does. And I didn't look too hard at it, but it looks like it essentially like injects a header into every module and or something like that, and it stuffs all of this like crap into the global into a global somewhere, and then it uses that global to like intercept these calls. And I mean, I haven't played with it. I don't know how well it works or if there are limitations to their approach. But it is something that you can do. That said, the main thing I was trying to get at was, yes, okay, you can do this. You have to use this loader thing. If you want to use another loader right now, you cannot. You can choose to mock at the module level or not, because if you need to use another loader, you're out of luck. So I was basically saying, like, look, we could do what we did with module level mocks and reloading modules in CommonJS. It's just that the experience now with ESM is like it's downgraded. It's not as ergonomic. It's like painful. It's more painful than it was with using CommonJS. And so there were a couple of proposals in the Twitter thread. I mean, they're not like proposals, but just like ideas. Like the one is let's allow multiple loaders, and the other one, which would be really nice for a test framework, is the ability to basically use a loader, but call it programmatically. So instead of needing to pass a flag on the command line, your test framework or just some library essentially that you import would be able to just like register its loader by just importing the module and calling a function or something like that. And I don't know like how feasible that is. There's most certainly some issues with loading part of the program and then loading this loader and then loading everything else with the loader. There's probably some like problems there. I don't know about the implementation, but intuition suggests that it's probably not that easy and it's going to like introduce weirdness and maybe some unexpected behavior. And I expect there will be some concerns there. But, if we were able to get this done with a loader, and if a test framework or a library, so if you want to do this mocking, you're going to want a library, right? And if a library can just like register its loader and do its thing, then I think we've gotten, obviously without having tried this test double thing, it seems like it would get us pretty much to where we want to go. It seems like it would give a very similar similar experience for developers who want to do this sort of thing, to do it with loaders. So I don't know if anybody besides Brian was paying attention to that thread, but yeah. So what did you think, Brian?
I mean, it sounded like the solutions that are there still won't cover the common use cases that people are used to, right? That's what it seemed like to me. So just the idea, like the way require works, the way you can just sort of punch things out and do things that you need to kind of arbitrarily, it just seems like that isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like to me, it seems the biggest problem is still reloading, right?
I mean, it sounded like your test double would allow you to do stuff like that. I'm going to have to. I want to take a look at it. I haven't had time between then and now, but I want to see like what exactly can you do with this thing. What can't you do with it? And I think knowing that is going to be important if we come to the modules team meeting with a specific ask. So
right. I think there's like, if adding the flag is an issue and so something is provided programmatically, then there's also the question of whether or not that's going to work with the loaders being on a separate thread, if that's the thing that ever happens. The other thing is that test double and its underlying library, which the name I forget all of a sudden, relies on the communication between the loader and the code running in the rest of the process. So if that communication channel is severed by putting it in workers and then blocking it off in some other way, like for security, like if it's in workers for security, then I doubt a communication channel is going to be available. So it might make that approach not feasible. So that's concerning.
Loaders in a worker. Is this a thing? I've never heard of this.
There's a work in progress PR from Bradley, as I understand.
Okay. Yeah, that would seem like it would break this, right?
Yeah, unless there's some other way of doing things that hasn't yet been explored. I mean, communication between threads, like worker threads in Node, is a thing, but it's unclear if this is going to operate like an ordinary worker thread or some other type of thread. So I think this is a case of like, let's take the requirements, let's take the existing use case of test double and bring that to the modules team. That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, that seems fair. Yeah, it's hard to say much more without actually having used it and understood what it can and can't do. And but it would be nice to not merge anything that's going to break it for sure. It is an experimental API, yes, but it's not. The concern isn't breaking that particular library. The concern is breaking the entire use case. So.
Right. I mean, the library is the only example, at least that I know of, that exhibits that use case.
Yes.
Specifically for ESM, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
It may be worth seeing if it can be put in SICM or something like that, like just to prove the breakage.
Right. Okay.
It may not be worth it because it may be too early.
Mm-hmm.
Let me find that PR real quick.
Okay. So, Ben, do you still wanna go like try to crush that meeting? Otherwise, if you're not able to do it next week, on their meeting is like on Wednesday, I can just go, and I will go ahead and take a closer look at test double and explain this is what they're doing with it, and this is what it can do. This is ideally we'd like it to work this way, and if I hope you're not going to make it broken. So
I'm happy to hop on. Like, if you're just like an extra person on the meeting, let me look at what time is the meeting next week?
It's 12 Pacific, I think. Let me look. Yeah.
That's on the 26th.
Yeah.
I have a free calendar. Like, if you want just an extra peer on the call with you, I'd be happy to join. Maybe just send me a calendar invite over and I'll toss it in. Actually, I'm adding my calendar right now.
Okay.
And that's an hour meeting.
I suspect, yeah.
It's the
no big deal if you can't make it, but I guess it would be nice.
Okay. I'm adding us both to the meeting.
Okay. All right. Okay. So does anybody have anything else they want to talk about here on the ESM reloading front?
There's also a PR from Gus to add the ability to have multiple loaders in a chaining fashion. I'll post the link to that in the chat there. Yeah, so it's not clear whether that'll be at odds with this other PR for worker threads or something like that. But it's worth noting that that's in there too, and that's especially relevant in the case where, for example, somebody who's doing a lot of shimming, say an APM tool, may need a loader, and even testing that loader is going to require mocking. So, like, that's going to require chaining, right? So that's the thing that's going to need to happen. So that's kind of related, I think.
With that, it's not just, to be clear, it's not just multiple loaders. It's that things have to happen in an order, right? And that's why you say chaining, because things are sequential. You have to do this and then this and then this. You can't just like try to run them all at once or in some like non-deterministic order, and then you get who knows what happens, right? Because they like take code, right? They take source code and they return other source code. Is that essentially like?
Right, exactly. The order absolutely matters. It's I kind of liken it to like Connect middlewares.
Or like Z index in the browser. Like, even maybe
sure.
could we add a Z index field to loaders? Kind of.
Well, then you may be giving the control to the loader author and not necessarily the user. Like, who deserves to have the control here?
Like, whoever puts the most nines on the end of the CSS row. With require, stacking and requires has been surprisingly stable in the community because there are these interdependencies, and like a lot of the time they seem to work okay. I guess it kind of, the burden with the require extensions is often like on the library tooling authors, because they'll get a bug report that's like coverage didn't work with, I don't know, pretty stack traces or something. And then this pretty stack trace author will make it so theirs happens after coverage or something, right? So I guess it would be better to define that more clearly. Kind of, is that what you'd advocate, Chris?
I'm not entirely sure. So you're comparing the loaders to the way like require extensions works?
Yeah, because require extensions are a stack of extensions a lot of the time too.
So you would have an extension for, I don't know, JS, right? And then you'd have another one to do something else. Is that how NYC works? I don't even know.
There's this one library that's really popular called, is it called Pirates? No. Blanking on what the name of the library is. But basically, sometimes you will have a chain of people all trying to hook the .js require.
Mm.
This already exists in the community. And then like what's basically happened is there's some libraries written in the community that handle creating a stack of people who run on top of that extension instead of, so it sounds really similar to the problem of like how you resolve the order of loaders.
Yeah, so it's not like such, I mean, in theory, it's a terrible, like awful problem, right? But in practice, it's not, because people don't use too many, and you know, libraries try to play nice with each other, right?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah. Like, because there definitely are like 2 or 3 library interactions on all trying to override the .js extension, and that's not uncommon. And it's basically been worked out between those third parties in the current world.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good to understand.
I'm trying to find the library. There's like one that's pretty used by everyone. I'm just looking it up.
And you know, so I'm just thinking of, well, if we had multiple loaders and we were able to use them programmatically, like, I don't know. I mean, that would have impact on at least how Mocha wants to load files, because then it could do something entirely different from the terrible things that it does now. Huh. And then of course, I think I did mention, and nobody had an answer, like what happens to the source map when you use a loader? Like, does the source map know about that? Because you, like this test double thing, it throws code, it throws a header at the top of each module. And so do your source maps know about that? Like, what happens in a stack trace? How does that work? And I don't think nobody knew in that thread, but I'm sure somebody does. Have you played with loaders at all, Ben, with your source map stuff?
I haven't really. I can speak kind of like to like the past world that we lived in, and you would end up in these. You actually have to resolve 2 steps of source maps before you get back to the original code. So you'd be in a world where like TS node adds a source map for the compilation from TypeScript to JavaScript, but then we're instrumenting the JavaScript. So NYC adds a source map for the instrument, it's for the compiled JavaScript code to the instrumented JavaScript code. And now to get from point C back to the original code, you actually have to apply 2 source map transformations. So yeah, it's a little bit of a nightmare, but it works today. Like, but you do need to basically, if you had 3 transformers that were all doing some sort of code change, you need to emit a source map at each layer. Is how it works. So you potentially need 3 source maps.
And so currently that would be the responsibility of whoever wrote the loader to emit a proper source map somehow.
I mean, presumably like a loader would be using some existing thing like rollup or like Istanbul instrument code or like some, probably it's pulling in some library that takes code A and puts out code B. And usually it's that library that most libraries that do any type of transformation like that are going to have an option to emit a source map.
It sounds like, I mean, it sounds like yes. So test double, for instance, it transforms source, and but I didn't see anything about source maps, and I don't know if they considered that. But that's gonna gum it up if they don't have any way to like provide a source map somehow, and I don't know like how you would do that from a loader. You see what I'm saying?
No, I do. And like, you've brought up an actual valid, you've brought up a valid point, like, because you need some sort of cache that knows that this code actually went through 2 transformation steps. So like, yeah, maybe Node.js's source map implementation would need to be setting aside like 2 source maps with 2 different identifiers, one for step A of the transformation, one for, I haven't thought about this too deeply. It's a hard problem.
I feel like Bradley was watching us on YouTube, and oh, they're talking about me and maybe something I can answer, right, Bradley?
Yeah, maybe. I don't have a good answer, so I just joined. I'm listening.
Yeah, I want to. We should think about that. Like,
I shared the require extensions library to show that this has been dealt with before, just so like it's not a new problem. I did find it.
Pirates.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a hard problem. You need to, like, it could be like, it could be the loader themselves is using a library that munges the source maps together on each step. So you do end up with one single source map that can go back to truth. But you need some way to, like, having 3 source maps is a nightmare. But building up a source map that is able to trace from your end transformation, if you went through 4 steps to get to that transformation, is a little difficult as well, especially if there were 3 other community libraries that happen to get you to that final transformation. So, yeah, hard problem. It feels like it would have to maybe be, I think you would maybe fix it at the loader level by trying to get to 1 source map by the end. And probably that feels like it would be done in the community and not in Node.js. Like, it feels like you'd have something like pirates, where someone writing a loader has some common approach that's being used to emit 1 source map instead of 3.
Right.
So I'm unfamiliar. I wrote a VS Code extension which did do nested source maps. Does Chrome DevTools currently not unwrap inline source maps multiple times? Does it only do 1 level?
I don't know. That's a good question. But your proposal is that you just start appending them below each other, basically, and have like 3 inline ones.
They can't. They have to wrap each other. They can't just be appended, unfortunately. But that's how we saw some code in the past, and we fixed a VS Code plugin by doing that. So we'd continuously unwrap until we reached something that did not have a source map.
Gotcha. But here's the interesting thing, though, right? Like, if you're going through a loader extension, and say there's 2 loader extensions. Loader extension A performs some modification to the code, so it's transforming from TypeScript into JavaScript. But then there's a second loader before it ends up in the module cache that adds coverage. How do you get back to that prior representation if it only existed in that ephemeral step of the 1 loader happening, right? Like, where does that code live that you're unwrapping to?
So there are a variety of ways this has been done in the past. The sources field of source maps is how I've always dealt with it originally. Out of band files don't really work so great in my experience, and you really do not want to put a whole sources field in your generated source.
Yeah, that's going to be like, that's going to triple your memory usage, right? And if you're using...
If you're lucky, because it has to be encoded with that weird stuff.
Well, I don't know. I feel like this is something that, I don't think this is a blocker to loaders, though. I think it's like saying that there would need to be some work in the community to get them to work the way we want.
I guess what I don't understand is if the community is enabled to even do that.
Well, there's ways to do it. Like I think you probably could get to the point where only the last source map added has the responsibility of getting back to the original source. So you're kind of like, I haven't thought it through completely, but if the second transformation knows there was a prior transformation, I think it should be able to inject source maps appropriately that get you from the second step to the first step instead of from the first step back, or from the second step back to the source code rather than the first step back to the source code. I have to think there's a way to do that. The other option is you could be caching sources to disk, like for the intermediate step. I mean, that's kind of ugly, but you could.
I mean, we used to do the dump everything to disk on loaders. And then we had to move off of that because people purely did not want to do that. Entire environments simply don't support it. A lot of cloud computing either has read-only file systems, unfortunately, or they've got ephemeral ones, so you can't guarantee that the files stay on disk, even if you manage to write them.
Yeah. Well, what I will say though is I don't think the problem is unique to loaders. I think we're already dealing with it today with require.extensions, like which have this exact same problem. The community's had to deal with it. So I don't think we're like taking anything away. Yeah.
So really, the problem is where to store the source maps and associated sources, to my knowledge. Currently, the V8 API does have the ability for us to alter the perceived source map of any given thing we put into the compiler. Maybe this is something we need to look at from that perspective, not directly off module loading itself, but on just strict compilation toolchain problem.
Yeah, I agree. And there's like we're just using a regex to pull out source maps right now in the source map cache we have in Node.js. And someone else had recommended a refactor of starting to try to leverage V8's source map field. So maybe we can extend on, maybe we could extend on what we're doing with source map caching in Node to solve this problem. Maybe there's a way to pull it off.
Even if we do that, I don't think we'll solve the multi-stage transformations. That I don't think we can automate that reliably. I agree that something like pirates or other things that do nesting properly is likely going to be the future.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds okay to me too. I mean, as long as it works, right? So if there's no way to do essentially what Pirates is doing, then yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what you'd end up with, like, I think what Pirates is essentially saying is like anyone who wants to override require extensions has to go through a third-party dependency to do so. So you're basically just creating a bottleneck where the composition happens in one place. So I mean, what could happen is there's just a loader that's designed for composing other loaders.
Right.
Yeah. And that loader would be like the one that's also potentially is like juggling source maps and figuring out what the heck it's doing with them.
Somebody wrote that. Was it Rich? He wrote one that did, you just give it an array basically of loaders and it would compose them. So this is actually fairly important, the idea of composing loaders being done in userland versus in core. If we do land the ability to specify multiple loaders in core, you may not be able to enforce that bottleneck.
That's interesting. So there's like a point of contention right now, which is whether we allow multiple loaders at once, essentially, versus having to have a bottleneck that does, versus a userland one that combines transforms.
There's a slight contention there. Overall, we are leaning towards allowing you to declare multiple loaders. In such a case, though, you would only be able to bottleneck at one of those segments. You could not bottleneck all the loaders.
Gotcha. I mean, nothing forces people to use like pirates in the community either. It's just that a few popular tools wanted to work properly amongst themselves. So, I mean, it can work without like Node blessing it.
Right. Yeah, Pirates is opt-in.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is good to understand. I mean, it is cool that you can solve at least some of this stuff with loaders. I mean, is it the right thing? Like, is it the right tool? I don't know. It may be the only tool available to us. So,
So one thing I think that could be actionable is instead of purely returning source and format from loaders, we could add fields that you want. It won't solve all the issues, but proposing something like a source map field that we can let you directly pipe it in rather than inline it as a comment at the end might at least simplify things. Yeah.
all right. Okay, so I think I wanted to wrap this one up. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up on the ESM module reloading topic? All right. So next one on the list is the spawn sync, spawn hooking, patching. So last we heard that we knew Stephen was working on something related to this, like this ultimate hook stuff. And Ben mentioned that we need to make sure Stephen understands, like, or we want to make it known to Stephen what our use cases are. And I don't know if anybody has talked to him since. I have not.
Ooh, an action item. Someone should actually take that action item.
Yeah.
I suppose I can take it. Does anyone else have? No, I'll mention it to Stephen. I think someone said on the call last week that Stephen already had some of these use cases in mind, so I can just reach out to him on Twitter or something. Confirm.
Yeah, I know he's been around, and I think he knows, but I'm not sure, and I don't have any current visibility into what he's doing. I suppose I could go hunt for it, but Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Ben. It looks like this better way to detect a process is exiting is there was nothing on this last week. As far as I understood, and Corey's not here this week, but as I understood, like he had found, I don't know. I don't actually know where this left off. But there was no notes for it from sorry, last meeting.
I can give a little context. So when we added coverage support to Node, I basically hacked in this approach to catching all types of exits, with be they signal or like just the normal process dot exit 0 or 1 or whatever. Sorry, just choking on something. Joy then implemented this kind of in a better way, and I think it ended up being like pretty specific to how we approached coverage to make sure we wrote the content to disk regardless of how we were exiting. But it was like ended up being like, I think some of it was inside the C layer. It wasn't like something easily hookable inside user land. So it would be nice to have something that was hookable inside of user land. And we talked about maybe it being another thing. You could just have an on listener on process that was like on like any exit or something. I don't know what it's called, but there's kind of code kicking around that does this for some edge cases, like making sure coverage reports are written to disk, but I don't think it's too exposed to user land. So I don't know, it'd be a cool feature.
Do you have like like an issue or something, or just like a change set or something you could point to with like what she did?
Yeah, I can totally dig that up.
Okay. All right. Cool. So the last time, last meeting, there was a note here about removing the source map support from the agenda. And then Ian said something, and I don't know if something about interleaved stack traces. And so I don't know if this wants to stay open or...
I feel like maybe keep it open because there's another thing that's come up, which is like trying to use V8's source map field instead of kind of reinventing it ourselves, like if it's practical. Because they do have the option to set a source map as you create the isolate or whatever it's called. The other thing, I think, to Ian's point, like it might be worth syncing with, well, Wes actually, and Wes's peer Guy. And I guess Jordan was working on this too. That there was like a little bit of a TC39 effort to standardize, I think, stack traces specifically. Might be worth talking to them and being like, hey, is there like is there a standard being thought of around how we should print the stack trace? Because then we could follow that and at least speak to that. So I don't know. I don't think I'm quite ready to move this off the agenda.
Well, and the source map support is still marked as experimental, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess the issue is kind of like maybe wrapping up some of these like edge cases and then removing the experimental status.
I agree. And I think the open issues are like, are we okay with the output format? And are we okay with not using V8's functionality for it yet? Or is there an easy way to plug in V8's tracking of them?
So do we know like who's using this stuff?
I'm using it for a lot of Google's libraries in my organization. So we just have it turned on for all our unit tests so we can more easily track down an exception in our TypeScript. So I'm using it on like 90 libraries. So I've used it quite a bit. Haven't gotten too much more user feedback though. So I'd love more user feedback.
I'll reach out actually too, because I'm just trying to think, okay, who's transpiling or whatever, their Node apps, or bundling. More people are starting to do it, but Loopback at IBM writes TypeScript for a Node library. And so maybe we should check with them.
I think a lot of people used to just reach for that one little dependency that's like
Source map support, right?
source map support, but this basically gives you that for free, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Yeah, but having feedback from a few more people other than my little team at Google would be great.
Okay. I'll reach out to them, or maybe even send a pull request myself, and see what it looks like. Okay. Anything else on the source maps?
I don't think so. I haven't had much time to work on them. I've been wanting to look at what it would mean to set that flag in V8. That's it. Less bullish about removing the experimental flag for some of the reasons we just brought up.
Right. Okay. So the last one here is arc parsing, and I believe like where that left off was I'm supposed to send a PR, and I have not done that, and that's all I know. I'm busy. Okay, I have other things.
I totally hear you.
I have other things that I'm supposed to be doing. So I will get to this when I get to it, and hopefully.
I would like to just put a strong, I think it would be awesome, because I think it will let us experiment with some of those other neat ideas we have, like being able to run a little HTTP server with arguments as a built-in node thing. That'd be cool. Yeah. I liked the corollary to Python people brought up for that type of functionality. I think that's really neat.
All right. So that is the agenda, and we have 8 minutes. So does anybody have anything that they want to bring up or show and tell or whatever?
I have yards running on Dino. It's an annoyingly long process to get there.
This is a Node.js tooling meeting.
All right, sorry. Well, it works in ESM too. Dino is just an ESM platform.
Yeah.
So the policies is going to start moving towards unflagging in the next year. I don't know if people even use that, but it's had a few minor changes to get it up to speed with recent stuff. So it should be more usable, especially after one PR lands on Monday. So yeah.
Is yeah, I have not even looked at policies. Is that in the docs already?
Yeah, it's in the docs, but it's kind of hard to generate stuff for without scoping mechanisms, which is what lands on Monday.
Okay. Monday, what release is that? Do you know?
Oh no, just on master.
Oh. Is it main or is it still master?
I believe it still has that name today.
All right. And so that will make policies much more useful, it sounds like then.
So it doesn't actually add much, but it just means that a human might be able to write a policy file.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. We'll check that out. Yeah, I don't have anything to announce really. I'm just kind of heads down on just some Mocha stuff. But yeah, so
Yeah, we do have the npm7 beta going on. So just a reminder, find anything, let us know, try it out.
So I didn't look into that. I had CC'd you on Twitter about the feedback about workspaces. I didn't really understand what the problem was.
Yeah, even now, it's my to-do list for next week to dig into that phantom dependencies. Never heard of that, but I found many blog posts on Google already. So it's on my to-do list to dig into it, make sure I understand and make sure it behaves well.
If you don't get it, I can reach out to Miroslav, is my colleague at IBM, and I'll just ask him what the hell he was talking about.
Oh, nice. Yeah. You can just have a 50-minute chat, and it's gonna be way faster than just
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll ask him. So okay. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? No. All right. Cool. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up. So then, everybody, please have a weekend.
Awesome.
And,
Take care.
we'll talk to you later. And remember, next in 2 weeks, it's the deep dive.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.